I don't know if I was trying to prove that I didn't have it, but I wanted everybody else to drink with me. So I was always like trying to get my sister-in-law to like, you want some wine? And she'd be like, no, it's 4 PM, and I'd be like, oh, okay.
Well, you tell the story about going to dinner with a cool mom, going to lunch with a cool mom.
Oh,
you're like,
yeah.
At a Mexican restaurant, you're like, margaritas? She's like, yeah, no, it's like noon.
Yeah.
And you're like, but it's a Mexican restaurant.
Yeah, I know.
So I get that.
Right. And in my mind, I was like, you can't have one margarita. Like, why?
And why wouldn't you?
And I couldn't.
That's the thing that goes with this.
Right. And I was like, is she on antibiotics? Yeah. Like, why would
she be?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are you pregnant again?
Yeah.
I was like, these people are so hard on themselves. These people who are like, no thanks.
The magic of, like, we need people in our lives that just take the bullshit away for a second and say, you have it that you can't do this, but it's not as big as you think it is.
I know.
Especially, like, in my case, like, and nobody's fucking listening, so what do you fucking care? Just do it.
Well, they will be. And then they'll have episodes to go back. You got to build it up.
Yeah.
You can't expect miracles.
Of course I have.
Yeah, thank you. Hi, Caitlin. We snuck into another one here, you guys. I was just, hi, everybody. It's your boy, Mark. Bonfire Talks Podcast, episode number whatever. And today I have with me, and I got to look at your title because I don't know your married name, Stefanie Wilder-Taylor.
Yes.
Yes. Accomplished author, thought leader, expert in the field of recovery, parenting, comedy, so many things. Like, that's who she is.
Game show writing.
Game show writing as well. So many things to you people in the world who know who Stefanie Wilder-Taylor is as an accomplished published author with a brand new book that just came out called Drunkish that I have read. I did some homework. That says a lot about how I feel about you, that I actually did something.
I was shocked when it messaged me. I'm always shocked when anybody actually reads it because I'm like, I'm a big whore. I'll go do the podcasts and I don't expect people, like, I can talk about it. But it's very impressive that you read it.
How can one have someone on their show to talk about a book and go, yeah, I haven't read it? Because I haven't written a book, but I have been on many, being interviewed by people who have no idea who you are. And I really want to say, like, literally just happened the other day. I'm like, fuck you. I don't need the press, and you don't need the service. You don't need the headache.
Right.
It's like, you could have read the bio. At least know, like, literally sat down to do a press thing for this tour I'm doing, a Wheel of Fortune Live, that I love doing this game show.
Right.
And the anchor comes on, it's a Zoom, and she says, what's your name? And I'm like, cool start. Cool. Pretty psyched about our conversation we're about to have. So to say, I would have read your book even if I didn't adore you as a human, if I was going to have you on my show. But reading your book was a joy.
Aww.
And I read it in a day. And I'm not a voracious reader. I read it because I couldn't put it down. And there's so much in this book, regardless of what your path is, whether alcohol abuse or recovery of any kind of any substance abuse or anything connects with you at all, even if that's not part of your story at all, there's still so much about life in this book that's both funny and heartwarming and sad and scary and uplifting and inspiring. So thank you for being here for that.
Thanks for saying that.
Yeah.
That's really nice. I tried to, I tried to write a book about getting sober, but as you can see, I don't have a super dramatic story, and there are a lot of memoirs out there that are about these like hellacious bottoming out stories. And it was very difficult for me at the beginning when I got sober because I really was hungry to hear stories that were like mine, that were like, yes, I did something bad, and we can get to that. And I'm not downplaying that I did something bad. That's what it took for me to go, oh, my drinking is actually worse than I thought. So
yeah, but in relation to things that are bad,
right?
Yours was a near miss. We'll talk about that, for instance.
Right, but the point is, I felt like in early sobriety, it was the stories of people who hadn't gone down that far, who were very functional, but who had made this decision because they saw the writing on the wall, or because it wasn't getting better, or because something happened, or because of a near miss. And those were the people that's what helped keep me sober. That's what helped me go, oh, okay, I'm not alone. I'm among company.
I can relate to this in a different field. Like, I was trying to put together a keynote. I do a lot of MC work for corporate events. And I'll do the MC work, the heavy lifting, and then somebody will come in and give a 45-minute talk about something. And they're usually somebody who's done something inspirational, like Eric. I always mention him, Weinmeier. I'm sorry I said your name wrong. I met you and you're amazing, but he's blind. But he climbed Mount Everest, blind.
Yeah, I mean, whatever.
And
I can do that.
It's amazing, and he's an incredible speaker, and there's so much I got from his talk, except how to pronounce his last name, which I'm embarrassed. But the takeaway, as I was trying to figure out what do I have to say, was similar to what you're saying, is how my story isn't remarkable until I got to this, that he climbed Mount Everest and he's blind. I get it. But when I hear the story, I'm both inspired, and a little overwhelmed. Like, I don't know that I feel that it makes me feel like I can get off the couch.
Right.
And then it dawned on me that we all have an Everest that's no less daunting.
Right.
And we're all blind to the things we're blind to. That's no less dark. And that's when I got that the common story that doesn't have prison or, horrible, horrible things.
Right. Or mental hospitals, or having my kids taken away. Or,
that's right.
Yeah.
There's still value in that. As a matter of fact, arguably for us, more value in that I feel seen vibe.
I'm a person who looks for the differences. It's really hard for me to look for the similarities unless they're glaring right in my face. So early in sobriety, that was my problem, is I looked at other people's stories and I was like, not like that. I'm not like that. So yeah, I do think it's important. And I do think that the more we just talk about the stuff that seems embarrassing, or seems like, oh, this is just me, or seems like nobody would really care about this, that's what helps. We have to shine a light on, and then everybody goes, we're all fucked up.
Same. And that's like when I was having anxiety. I went through a huge bout with anxiety back in 1990, whatever. And it's come and gone, but I've learned some tools. But one of the things about it was I thought I was the only one who'd ever experienced this. And my life was so good, how could I be anxious about anything?
Right.
Like, there's nothing to be anxious about, and yet you're sitting here in the fetal position in the shower. Until I spoke about it to anyone, and they went, same. I totally feel that. And I'm like, oh, thank God I'm not dying of some disease.
Right.
Which is what your book feels like to me. And let me just back this up a little bit, that I know Stefanie from before she was a thought leader and a famous author.
Way before. My very first job.
Yeah, very first job.
Outside of waitressing. I mean, my very first real big girl job.
Which was a game show called The Big Date. Where I was the host, and it was really funny. It was remarkably funny for what the show was.
Yeah. And
you were part of that funny. You were one of the writers writing the jokes and the questions and the whole bits, And so we had that experience, and then it's now... This is one of the things I love about life, and we've shared about this on a lot of my episodes, but I want to say this because I think it's valuable, is that you never know why or how people show up in your life, even if you haven't seen them in years, and what comes out of that. So Stefanie and her friend Lynette have had a podcast called For Crying Out Loud for 13 years, which is really great about how difficult it is to be a mom and everything else. And you invited me to be a guest on your podcast, and it was a great experience. And then afterwards, I was saying, I really want to get in this podcast game. And I started saying all the reasons why I can't, that I had been saying to everyone who'd listened to me, and everybody would agree with me of why I can't. And you just said, that's just stupid. You can do it here, and you can just do it, and it's not that hard. And talk to Kalen. He's a great producer, and he'll show you how, and we use this. And all of it, just like all the bullshit got stripped away. And I, at first, was embarrassed that I was believing my own bullshit after all this enlightened shit I think I have. I don't know anything. And then Kalen made it really simple. I tell that story all the time. It was like, just come in on Tuesday and do it. So thank you for that. as I sit on your couch having you as my guest.
Well, it's funny because let me compliment you for a second,
Okay.
because Lynette and I were doing some episode and we were talking about Temptation Island, and we were talking about you, and I was like, he was the first host. I worked on this show, and he's like the nicest guy on the planet. And right, Kaylin? And we started saying, I was like, honestly, like I've worked with a lot of hosts, and I said, Mark was like so genuinely kind to everybody. And I remembered a story that you were sick. I feel like you might have even had a fever, and you were like, no, it's okay. There's a whole crew. I'm not going to let people down. And you were like sick behind the scenes, but like as soon as they were like action, you were like completely professional and smiling and nice to never, ever, ever once did you yell at anybody. And like people take away from that, like, oh, Mark Wahlberg is a really nice guy who people want to work with.
12 of those crew died from the infection I gave them that day. Because I was selfish.
This was way pre-COVID. Yeah. This was like, 100 years pre-COVID. Yeah. And I said, you know what? I mean, I haven't seen him in a really long time, but I'll reach out to him and see if he wants to come on our podcast. Because people responded and they were like, oh my God, you should have him on your podcast. And I was like, I think I'll ask him. And then true to your nature, you responded right away and you were like, absolutely, I would love to.
I stole all your shit.
And then you were like, I'd love to talk to you about starting a podcast. Left. And I was like, you should. Why wouldn't you?
And here we are. So if you don't like it, blame Stefanie. And so let's talk about this book. First of all, let's talk about not just this book. Mm-hmm. So I'm a little fangirly with you. Is there a gender specific, like, can you fanboy? Fanboy, it's like fangirling, which I think is kind of misogynistic.
I agree.
I'm fan non-gender. I'm just fanny. No, that's bad. That's even bad in Australia. That's really bad.
You're non-binary fanning. Yes. Whatever that is.
I'm all-inclusively fanning. You. Because I think you've accomplished amazing things, that you are truly an artist, truly a talented writer, but you're truly a brave warrior. You're a brave warrior. Because parenting, I'm the dad, which is the easier ride. Okay? And it's hell.
Yeah.
And Kayla and I, we were just talking about this earlier. Mm-hmm. It sucks so bad to be a parent sometimes because so much happens to your kids that you have no control over, and it leaves you feeling helpless, scared to death, and angry, resentful, all the things. Right, Kayla?
Yeah, that's right.
And so fuck you guys, kids. Thank you for the misery you have caused me, children.
You get mad at like all kinds of random things like other parents and teachers. And there's so much like self-righteous anger that has come out for me in, just like accusing many kids of being bullies, maybe not to their face, but everybody feels like a bully.
Yes.
Anybody that's not nice to your kid, you're like, how dare you?
Yes.
That's crazy.
Yes. As a matter of fact, somebody said to me recently about my son that he was a wild man as a kid. He turned out great, but boy, he was an animal. And I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about.
Right?
I never saw that once. He was adorable, thoughtful, sweetheart of a child, well-behaved. I have no fucking idea what you're talking about.
So funny. This one time, my son was had this pretty good friend, I thought. I hope they never hear this, but it doesn't really matter. It's not bad about them. But it was a teacher at their school, and her son was friends with my son. They were the same age in the same class. And then that kid like kind of stopped hanging around with my kid. They, was suddenly like busy all the time when it was like, when I'd be like, hey, does your kid want to play with my kid? And she, oh no, he's got this going on. And I was, starting to smell bullshit because I'm like, really? It was weird. And then this was also my kid's teacher, and she wasn't. Anyway, finally I was like, you know what? I said to this teacher, hey, is there something like going on? Like, is there a reason why your kid is always busy? And she said, you should ask my husband. And I was like, oh, no. Yeah. So then I got scared and wasn't going to ask her husband, but then he reached out to me and he was like, hey, so blah, blah, blah said that you were asking about why the kids aren't really getting together. And basically he said, and these kids were like second grade,
right?
Maybe third grade at the time. And he said, yeah, your kid doesn't like losing. Like basically told me a few things that were
just took your kid's inventory basically.
Yes, that were his kid was having trouble with. But you know what? Basically saying that my kid was being kind of a know-it-all and his kid was not enjoying some of their time together. Okay. And at first, of course, I was like, that is insanity. Like, we treat this kid like gold and they seem to have a great time together. But upon further reflection, I was like, my kid kind of is a know-it-all, like a little bit. Sometimes, like, you know what? And I wonder if that could be hard on another kid sometimes. And I really did. I had to talk to my kid and just go, sometimes you don't have to be right. Like, sometimes that can be hard for your friends when, like, sometimes you have to just be like, okay, yeah, sure, we can play that. Like, But
I think that says a lot as a mom because I know a lot of moms and dads too. Maybe, I don't know if it's a mom-dad split, but the willingness to actually look at your kid honestly and objectively, it's not an easy muscle to exercise.
No. I mean, it didn't make me think my kid's not a good kid. I still thought this kid was an asshole for not wanting to spend time with my kid.
And the father and the mother.
All of them. You're all on my list.
Yeah.
But it was, I was like, all right.
Maybe there's some truth to this. I want to talk about why, besides I just like hanging out with you, and besides the fact that this book specifically there's so much in it that I'm like going, yes, same. I'm not an alcoholic, but I'm married to one, which I've said here on the podcast, and I've had her okay to break her anonymity on this. I'll also tell you all the people I've met at meetings. No, I'm just kidding. I can't do that. My wife's 40 years sober.
That's amazing.
It's unbelievable. I met her when she was like a year and a half sober.
Oh.
And I'm like, yeah, well, so that's weird. And I don't think that has anything to do with me. So cool, whatever. And I didn't realize it was going to be my entire life's journey to learn what it is to be. It's a family disease, essentially.
Right. But it's interesting that you never saw her drunk.
Never saw her drunk, never had a drink with her.
Right.
And it may be a regret for her. Like she says she wouldn't mind having a glass of wine and being tipsy with me. And I said there's no chance we'll ever have a three-way because you need to be able to say I was so drunk and that was the reason why we decided to have a threesome.
Yeah.
There are a lot of other reasons why that's never going to happen for me. But I like to think that's the one.
Right.
So, but anyway, Robbie's sobriety and the journey of her sobriety and what it has forced her to look at and maintain and take care of and grow has been my journey too. So I make no bones about the fact that anything that I say that's emotionally intelligent is born out of that experience. And watching her learn how to be sober, manage to be sober through a life married to a guy in show business where you never know. I mean, the times we've been broke and bankrupt and moving and all these things could rock anybody's sobriety, and it never did hers. And I hear that in your book. And why I thought it was valuable to anybody listening to my podcast is one of the things I'm really grateful for is that Temptation Island has afforded me this entire audience and community of people that I'm now friends with who have been former contestants or whatever, or viewers, whatever. And I hear a lot amongst those friends of mine, those younger friends of mine, grappling with, they're transitioning from party life, 20-somethings into 30-somethings, where party life is, you got to show up, right?
Right.
So getting drunk on a Wednesday when you're 22 is just, okay.
Right.
But getting drunk on a Wednesday when you're 32 hits different. And I think what you talk about because you take us from your childhood to today through your drinking, which doesn't appear to be what you guys might think alcoholism looks like. And so I thought I think there's a lot in this book for all of you, regardless of where you're at, that will inform you and entertain you too. The book's really, really funny. But it's
not a lot of drinking memoirs are humorous.
No.
My favorite is Dry by Augustine Burroughs. I don't know if you've heard of that book. It's like my all-time favorite memoir. And that was a bit of the inspiration for me. I mean, that book was written a really long time ago. But I was like, I've read a lot of memoirs about people getting sober, and they're usually fairly dark. Not that there's anything wrong with that. That's very enjoyable as
this
well.
Goes back to what I'm talking about. It's like the Everest thing. It's the out of the darkness, I lifted myself up. And after I got out of prison, which is valuable.
Yeah.
But what I find interesting about your story is very in line with what I've learned about the disease or the syndrome or the allergy towards alcohol. Is that the voice of alcoholism, the voice of addiction, is tricky and smart and subtle.
Cunning, baffling, and powerful.
That's the words from the book, right?
Yeah.
And so when it's blatant, like you just got arrested or you killed someone, well, then you can see alcoholism showing up in your life.
Right.
But we can justify our behavior and say, I'm not so sure this is really costing me. And you say that in the book. Further on the book when we go through your drinking and how it presents, and it presents pretty benignly. And you've written books about the experience of being a mom who likes to have a glass of wine because being a mom sucks.
Right.
And so you before you were sober, you wrote and published books that a lot of moms related to. Is like, mommy needs a little mommy juice.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with that.
And I maintain that, like, for other people and for moms, I don't think there's anything wrong with having a glass of wine around your kids. I mean, dads have a beer around their kids all the time and watch football. No dad would ever be like, oh, I don't know if it's super responsible for me to be having a couple of beers while I'm with it.
My dad would give me a sip.
Yeah.
And no parent ever had a problem with that.
Right. And I think that a lot of that was moms trying to take back, like, yeah, we need a glass of wine too. We need something to take the edge off. And like, what's wrong with it? And there's nothing wrong with it if you don't have a problem.
And by the way, I think you handled that so gracefully because you became nationally known as the woman advocating for mom gets to have a glass of wine.
Yeah, I did.
You did.
Yeah.
And because when you say something honest, others hear it. And so people felt seen by what you were sharing as a mom. But then you had the courage to continue the story that for you, not other moms, but for you, that one glass of wine turned into two and into three, and then it started to present in some scary ways.
Yeah.
And then you had to then write this book. You didn't have to, but you chose to write this book, which is...
I waited 14 years, though.
Of sobriety, 14 sober years.
Yes. Yeah. I didn't write this book. I didn't have this book in me right away, but it was through having a lot of those experiences and, living through, I mean, I did quite a few TV appearances, especially at the beginning, because I was basically outed. It was an accident.
The Katie Couric
accident. Yeah.
The Katie Couric interview you talk about in the book made me want to call her and take up for my friend Stephanie. It turned out to be great.
Yeah, I was nice. I was nicer about it in the book. The first version that I sent to my editor, I asked her, like, do you think I should pull this back a little bit? And she was like, it's up to you. I mean, because if it's true, if you're telling the truth, you're allowed to tell the truth. Like, it doesn't matter if she gets mad about it. But in the end, I was like, do I have a vendetta against Katie Couric? No, I don't. Like, I let that resentment go a long time ago. It was very upsetting at the time, but the real story is just deeper than that. And it was
what's
just not
important
nice.
To note is
it wasn't, yeah.
In the book, you'll see what we're talking about. But let's just say that there was a part of your story that you chose to keep personal, that you didn't want to say in an interview. Yeah, we can say
I drove drunk with my kids, and that was what got me sober. No. My whole story is basically that I did not feel that my drinking was at any kind of, not one of my friends would have said that I was an alcoholic. Also in my mind. And also my husband did not think I had a drinking problem, but there were people that were concerned about the way I drank, not because I was hammered all the time, but because they felt that I was maybe overly reliant on alcohol. My husband felt that I didn't have an off switch. Wasn't that I was doing things that were dangerous or that I was embarrassing him or embarrassing me or, like I said, but it was that he would sometimes get concerned, like, when you're drinking, you don't know you're drunk. So we would go through all these little games of like, how about I tell you, this is how we'll work it out. When we're at a party and people are just refilling your wine glass, I'll tell you when when I feel like you're starting to seem tipsy.
Because you obviously don't recognize this.
I don't recognize it. Right. So that's how he was going to help me. But of course, you give a person who's, maybe has some alcoholic tendencies, somebody who's going to now try to control it. And I was like, oh, the wine police.
Right.
Great. And then I would be mad immediately. So that was quickly, he was like, okay, do your thing.
Do your thing.
Do you, but again, when I quit drinking, even though, so all of this led to more drinking in my house, like starting to drink more than I was ever comfortable with, but always thinking I'm going to get control over this
even in what you share in the book, even at the worst of it, it wasn't sloppy.
No.
It was fall asleep after the kids you put the kids to bed every night, read them stories, you were pretty sober for all of that. And then afterwards, as one would do, you have a glass of wine. The difference is you'd have 4, and then you'd fall asleep on the couch.
And then go to sleep.
Right.
Kind of be passed out. And then my husband, who was a very loving, consistent man, still is, would be like, oh, my wife is really stressed out. He was a producer. He was working a lot of hours. So he was like, I guess it's up to me to make sure, he was waking up in the middle of the night with the twins because his wife was sleeping as far as he was concerned.
But be clear, you have a daughter, and then you had twins,
right?
Twin boys who were preemies.
Girl and boy, yeah.
And had digestive issues and some growth issues, and colicky. And so one would recognize as a husband, if they're loving, like John is, we can say his name, you said in the book, right? And I love him from this book, who he is.
He's a good guy.
Was basically writing your behavior off as sleep deprivation, the stress of mommyhood, which is very much what we were talking about before about, hey, moms, you get to have a beer at the end of the day too.
Right.
But what you're sharing in this book is, even though it seemed benign and you could justify all the behavior, it was a little more than what was healthy.
Well, I think that what I didn't understand until I quit drinking and removed the substance was that the drinking I was doing, I was in pain. I was anxious. I was triggered. Parenthood triggered probably a lot of my own childhood and my own insecurities, and a lot of chaos was brewing beneath the surface. Stuff that I thought I dealt with
from your childhood,
unaddressed issues with me that, you think, I'd been in therapy before and I thought I really tackled a lot of this stuff, but I think becoming a mom brought a lot of stuff up, and I'm a gigantic people pleaser, and I was always feeling like I wasn't enough, and it was painful so I used alcohol like I'd always done, but now
it makes it less awkward in a party situation. It makes it less awkward when meeting new people. It takes the edge off a little bit so you can be what you think is the real you, but it's really just numbing what you're feeling.
Yeah. And of course, for anybody that drinks, there's also drinking becomes just habitual. So it's not like I'm always like, I'm sad, I'm going to drink. It's like a lot of times it's I'm having a great time and drinking makes it better. I am more comfortable, more alive, more engaged, more relaxed, like all the things. Listen, alcohol works for a lot of people. And it worked for me, and I really enjoyed drinking. I wasn't some sad alcoholic. No. I was like a person who used a substance and didn't ever have to deal with myself much without it. I didn't have to do a lot of that work. You know what I mean? So what happened with me was I just kept making promises to myself, and I'm going to cut down. And then it got to the point where I was like, you know what? Making all these promises and breaking them is just exhausting. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to be somebody who drinks, but I'm just going to do that drinking at home I'm not hurting anybody. In my mind, I was like, as long as I'm not hurting anybody, I'm still being a great mom. I'm just going to have as much wine as I want. But at night when the kids are in bed, and of course, I'm never going to drive drunk or do anything dangerous.
This is why I wanted you to share this, because so many of the people that I met on my show and off my show and in a certain age group that I just mentioned,
right,
are having these conversations a lot about the management of things they like to do for fun. Which, by the way, is not unhealthy to have those conversations. But it is something to look at, because it is the early, I hate to say warning signs, but it's the first flag. Let's use your language, guys. It's a red flag that if you're managing something, you might want to look deeper at what you're managing, which is what your journey tells me.
Well, I kept looking for these signs all the time. I was, you'll find out in the book, I took the Are You an Alcoholic quiz many times. There's online versions. There's, there's versions in pamphlets at meetings,
That's right. The first thing they give you is, if you're questioning, when you go to an AA meeting, the first thing they say is, do you think you're an alcoholic? Well, here's a few questions, and answer these questions, and you'll know.
Right. So I used to go to those meetings with a friend of mine. I'd gone a couple times, and, I just thought it was such a cult. And these people just want everybody to have an alcohol problem.
Oh, yeah. And if you have 2 drinks, then you're an alcoholic.
Right.
Yeah.
So it was very easy to kind of write off, because it seemed clear to me what problem drinking looked like. I think we all know somebody who's an alcoholic that's untreated, right? That we can go,
yeah,
that person needs help.
Yes.
Somebody needs to do an intervention, not me, but somebody needs to help that guy, right? Yeah. Or that woman. And I was not that person. I did not see myself as somebody that anybody would worry about. It was just the nagging, why don't I drink like other people though? Why do I sometimes set out to have, I'm only going to have 2 glasses of wine and I have 6? Why do I...
I say I'm going to wait till Friday, but then by Tuesday I'm thinking, right. Tuesday's really kind of Wednesday.
One drink's not going to hurt. It's a Tuesday. I'm out with some friends. I'll have a drink. And I make bad decisions when I drink. My thing was always how do I accidentally get drunk all the time? I didn't mean to. I thought and one of those situations I write about in the book was a Halloween night when I'm out with my daughter, my older daughter, who was 2 at the time.
That really touched me. This story touches me because it's the first
friends.
time it hit home with what the cost of it is.
Right. And that wasn't my bottom. Well, basically, I was out with a friend. I was still kind of a new mom. I think my daughter was just about to turn 2.
And you end up being friends with other kids' moms. That's what the friend group becomes.
So I'm friends with another mom, and she comes trick-or-treating with her kid's grandma. So her mom comes with us. And it's just a little group of us, and it's me and my husband and her husband and the mom, and we all go out trick-or-treating, and I'm going to have fun with this. I'm going to make themed drinks. I was always the one that was way into the cocktail aspect of it.
Yeah.
Nobody else cared that much about the drinking.
Nobody
pairing, else.
The pairing of the event with the alcohol.
I'm going to make some kind of orange and brown, orange and black cocktail. I made Kahlua and orange juice, and I'm this is called a Tootsie Roll. And, everybody else was just okay.
Yeah.
It's
not about that right now.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. Although, it's funny because in subsequent years, I do see a lot of my neighbors being hammered on Halloween. And I'm okay. But in our particular young kids, yes, they were not into getting drunk. I got drunk by myself, and then became best friends with the grandma, apparently, who was kind of closer in age to me. I found out later. And then apparently I was best friends with her. We were BFFs. We went trick-or-treating, apparently, and I exchanged phone numbers with her. And I found out about this after the fact because I had no memory.
Yeah.
Did not remember it. And it's interesting because I felt humiliated inside. How could I do that? I missed this adorable Halloween. I only see the pictures of it, and I don't remember almost any of it except for a little bit of the before. And I had a real come to Jesus moment where I was this is not what I want for myself. I don't want to be a drunk mom. And if I had gotten sober at that point, that would have been a good thing. but I did not. I tried. I quit drinking, and then I got pregnant with twins, and then I didn't drink through that whole pregnancy.
And you talk about that in the book, which I find interesting because I always wonder about how people who drink or are alcoholic and then get pregnant and then suddenly don't drink for 9 months. And I'm like, how? And you talk about the fact that, in fact, because of what your body's naturally doing, you're kind of buzzed the whole 9 months from hormones.
Yeah, I had this weird reaction to being pregnant, and I hear this from a lot of women, where the hormones did a good thing to me during the pregnancy, where I was like, oh my gosh, I think I'm kind of a laid back person. It's so funny that I've always thought of myself as so anxious, but like pretty cool.
But you're kind of getting dopamine from the baby.
I think I was. Yeah. I think I was. And then the second I had the baby, the hormone levels dropped, and I was like, what the fuck just happened to my life?
Coming off
I
of
feel
heroin.
Horrible. I felt, it was a really awful feeling. And I mean, I had postpartum. I didn't have like depression, but I was crying all the time. I was diagnosed with postpartum anxiety. So what do you do when you're feeling anxious? Like you go, oh, wine, my old friend. I can't believe I forgot to drink while I was pregnant, you know? Right. So when I quit drinking on purpose before I got pregnant with twins, it was very close after. So it was like 6 weeks after I quit drinking, I found I was pregnant. So I don't drink through that whole pregnancy. And I'm like, oh,
not so hard.
Problem solved.
Yeah.
Like, I'm fine. It's so
I'm
crazy.
obviously not an alcoholic.
Right. And it really seemed clear to me that I was like, oh, I think that the reason I was drinking so much is because my older daughter, whose name is Elby, because Elby was so young and I was still adjusting to parenthood. And like, I was probably just really stressed out and I let things get kind of bad. But nobody who's an alcoholic could go all this time without drinking and not even miss it. So I'm not an alcoholic, which was very good news to me because now I had newborn twins and a 3-year-old. And I was like, Mama really needs wine now.
Yes.
But I didn't put that together that like, oh, you are making a rationalization. I really and truly was like, I don't have a problem.
This is the other thing that I think is really helpful for people who read the book, who are grappling with anything.
Yeah.
Is that so much of the conversation that I hear in your book, and I have heard from others, when grappling with do I have a problem, is the secret conversation about the management. Like all these things you're sharing with me now were not things you were sharing to your husband or others. No. You weren't outwardly going, I love having wine at the end of the night. I wonder if it's a problem. Boy, I'm going to try to manage it. Hey, keep me accountable. I'm only drinking on Fridays. This is all pacts you were making with yourself in the moment inside your head that you would then break.
Oh, God forbid my husband thought I had a drinking problem. Then he's going to be watching me all the time.
Right. So I have to I know I do because I'm talking about it all the time, even though even in my own inner dialogue, I'm not copping to it.
Right.
But I know enough to know that I can't share it because then somebody's going to hold me accountable.
Right.
And then I'm going to have to stop drinking. And I don't want to do that.
Right.
So I think that's really valuable, is that you're sharing a constant conversation you're having only with yourself. And one of the things you learn when you're married to an alcoholic are a lot of the fucking phrases that they say that drive me crazy but are very good. And one of them is, you're as sick as your secrets.
Very true.
And I find that in your book a lot, that your management, you're having a whole experience inside your head around this. And because of the way it presents, it doesn't particularly look like you're an alcoholic, and nobody's particularly that concerned.
Right.
Although a few people do show up.
My sister-in-law, who's, very blunt, my sister-in-law had no problem. Although later, it's funny, because I talked to her about it. And of course, she knew I was going to write about this in the book. But, and she was trying to remember the time. She had discussed with my brother. So when the twins were really young and I had gone back to drinking, one of the things about having an addiction to alcohol, maybe to anything, is it's progressive. So even if you don't do it for a long time, when you start doing it again, you catch up. Like you catch back up with yourself.
It's actually gone further than when you stopped.
Right. So now I'm like, oh, now that I'm having the wine again, I'm like, I really need this. And the twins had colic, and there was just constant crying, and I couldn't get any fucking quiet in my brain. And I really felt like I needed my drink at the end of the day. And my brother and my sister-in-law were coming over for a while, like a couple days a week to try to help me.
You had your hands full.
I had my hands full.
With or without alcohol, it was a lot.
Exactly. But I also wanted to, I don't know if I was trying to prove that I didn't have, but I wanted everybody else to drink with me. So I was always like trying to get my sister-in-law to like, you want some wine? You know, and she'd be like, no, it's 4 p.m, you know? And I'd be like, oh, okay.
Well, you tell the story about going to dinner with a cool mom, going to lunch with a cool mom.
Oh,
you're like,
yeah.
At a Mexican restaurant, you're like, margaritas? She's like, yeah, no, it's like noon.
Yeah.
And you're like, but it's a Mexican restaurant.
Yeah, I know.
You know, so I get that.
Right. And yeah, in my mind, I was like, you can't have one margarita. Like, why?
And why wouldn't
like,
you?
And I couldn't.
That's the thing that goes with this.
Right. And I was like, is she on antibiotics? Yeah. Like, why would
she
be? Yeah.
Yeah.
Are you pregnant again?
Yeah.
I was like, these people are so hard on themselves. These people who are like, no thanks. And then her thing was like, I mean, I have to drive and I'm going to get really tired and it's noon. Yeah. All that stuff. And I came away with that from that, like, she's not my type of person. You know, we're still best friends to this day. And we laugh about that. And she let me put that in the book and use her name. Of course, it makes me, the whole
That's
book
Lara,
is really making,
if I remember
Lara,
Lara,
yeah. The whole book makes me look like an asshole. So I didn't have trouble. People were happy to let me use their real names. But anyway, the point is,
I don't think it makes you look like an asshole, but it definitely makes you look human, and it made me love you more.
Well, it's self-deprecating. The book is, we're making fun of all the ways that I was clearly in denial. So I go back to drinking. My sister-in-law does kind of point it out, but I'm like, I poo-poo that. She's out of her mind.
And how dare she?
And how dare she? And also, I was taking a bit of Xanax at that point because I had these twins. They have colic. I have anxiety. I have a psychiatrist. I'm getting prescribed medication. I'm not abusing it. You know, am I sometimes taking more of it? In my mind, even though I was combining all these things and still taking some Vicodin from the C-section and doing these things, it's all compartmentalized in my brain. So it's like, well, this is because of this, and this is because I'm fun, and this is because I need it. And you know what I'm saying?
And they don't ever overlap.
No.
And taking a Xanax and a glass of wine doesn't make it more.
Right. Better. Not more,
because,
though. It's
by
not
the way,
a
the
problem.
Xanax says as needed.
Right.
And
exactly.
I need it. And the doctor said that's cool.
Right. Exactly. But I'm not telling the psychiatrist
the left hand with the right hand's doing
that I'm drinking a lot because I'm thinking I don't drink that much. It's all a crazy stew of denial and survival, really. I'm surviving.
Yes.
So I'm trying to moderate. I'm like having trouble with it. And eventually I'm just like, it's just too exhausting. So I'm just going to drink how I want to, but I'm not going to do anything dangerous. And as I recount in the book, I go out one night, and this is the problem. If you're somebody who's not good at regulating your drinking, and I know this now. At the time, I kept thinking I was going to be good at regulating my drinking. Every new time I was like, this time is going to be different. I'm going to have a better handle on it. What I just couldn't understand is that I can't help it. I am unpredictable when I drink. So even though I feel like I have a pretty solid moral compass and know right from wrong, my brain doesn't know I'm drunk. I'm like, I'm fine. So I'm at this play date with a bunch of moms. Everybody's drinking as far as I can tell. And I have martinis. Of course, do I know what I was thinking at the time? I was thinking, this is super fun. This is a great time. I deserve to unwind and have fun with other moms.
Yeah.
I feel
and I'll
normal.
start drinking in a few hours and
won't be driving for a while.
Yeah.
So I continue having martinis. My husband's trying to call me. I'm ignoring him because I'm like, stop raining on my parade.
Just because you're home with the babies to one night.
He's
do this
home
every
with
day.
one baby. I've got two kids with me.
Yeah.
I'm like, dude, relax. Like, enjoy your night.
Yeah.
Like, I'm doing the lion's share of the work. A
Right.
lot of like defensiveness from me. Anyway, I get home. I drove home in this state, but again, not thinking I'm in this state. In my mind, I was totally sober. My husband is horrified, so mad and of course accuses me of being drunk, which is not like him. He really wasn't that type of person.
But it's amazing to me how much he loved you and how much he didn't judge you, because there were so many warning signs.
Right.
And he was not seeing them because his love for you blinded that a little bit. And also important to note, who you were as a wife and a wife and a mother wasn't compromised.
Right.
You were.
I was a good mom.
A really incredible mom, which is why the story lands for me. Because it's this moment.
I was the mom that read my kids stories and researched, pediatricians and, made sure that all of my kids' needs were taken care of. And I put mine last.
And they weren't particularly easy. You had some challenges.
I had challenges. I had a medically, my younger daughter, one of my twins, was born 2 pounds. By the way, nothing to do with drinking. I didn't drink during my pregnancy. It was due to scar tissue that I'd had from prior surgeries. And so she wasn't getting the proper blood flow. The other twin was fine, and then she wasn't really eating, and she was always small, and we had to get a feeding tube at one point. I was dealing with a lot.
A lot.
Poor baby was dealing with a lot too, and she's perfectly fine and very healthy now.
But even before the babies, you had been having conversations your whole life.
Well, that's the thing, yes.
About, is this drinking a thing? Can I manage it? How do we want to do it?
Right.
Okay. And so then this night comes. Because they always talk about an AA hitting a bottom. And we think of it looking like a dramatic, like I said, like you got arrested or you killed someone or stuff like that. And yours is not as dramatic in comparison, but incredibly dramatic for you and for me as a reader.
Yeah. So for me, I was defensive that night because my brain still told me that I wasn't drunk.
Yeah.
I would have sworn on a stack of Bibles that I was sober, and my husband was being ridiculous and mean and judgy. And, then I woke up the next day and I was incredibly hungover, and I realized that the night was spotty, and it hit me like a ton of bricks. I woke up on the couch, and my husband and I don't really have those type of fights where I sleep on the couch. That just wasn't our thing. Mm-hmm. So I knew this is bad. And I knew that he was really mad at me, and I knew I'd driven drunk. And the thought of that, I think it just clicked in that one moment that I was like, I was really drunk. And I put my kids in the worst kind of danger. And who does that? Only somebody, the only way that I could account for that behavior was that I have a drinking problem, because, and that's when I had to go, I guess it doesn't matter that it doesn't look like these things that I think it's supposed to look like. What matters is that I am not safe when I drink. I knew, I was like, I could go convince my husband because he doesn't think I'm an alcoholic. And in fact, I told him how sorry I was and that I knew what I'd done. And I said, I'm going to quit drinking. And his response to me was like, well, I don't think that's overkill. I don't think you need to quit drink.
Just don't drive when you're drinking.
Right.
Which for a normal person who doesn't have a problem with alcohol,
right,
makes perfect sense.
Right.
It makes perfect. Well,
right.
Okay, I'll do that.
Right.
Yeah.
But I knew enough at that point. I was 42 years old. I'd been drinking since I was 14. And it was all of a sudden, I just got honest with myself. And I said, but I can't promise you that. I was like, yeah, that sounds good to just never drive drunk, but I shouldn't have done that why did I do that in the first place?
And historical data proves that every time I made a declaration, every time you'd made a declaration to make change, it lasted only for a period of time or didn't last at all.
Right, and that's what I told him.
But
I said I promised myself that I would never drive drunk, and then I just did.
But you said the nugget. You got honest with yourself.
Right.
Because the entire book is this conversation you're having with yourself, where we as the reader can hear what you're struggling with, and we want to say to you, yeah, you got a fucking problem.
Right.
Yeah, we don't all do this. But
that's what I allow you to do.
There's another thing you said that is really honest in the book and really helpful for people, is that no one gets sober for someone else. And I'm going to say it wrong. But for you, your kids were the reason you chose to get sober. Staying sober you did for yourself. Am I saying this wrong?
No,
you understand what I'm saying?
Yes, I think, and I maintain this. They say you can't get sober for someone else because you won't stay sober. And I say that that's bullshit. Like, you get sober for the way you get sober. I don't think if I was single, things would have hit a point.
And I think what this really is that when we're in it, when we're alcoholic, and I say we because it's my journey with Robbie, I, the alcoholic, may not have enough love to save myself.
Right.
But I do have enough love to save them. That's
or
what
if you're in, let's say you're married and, and I'm not saying everybody does this, but let's say your spouse is going to leave you because they're like, you're an alcoholic and I don't want to live like this anymore. You might make the decision like, fine, I don't want my spouse to leave me, so I'm going to quit drinking. And then you find out that being sober, what happens to a lot of people, I think, is you do the work of getting sober, and it can be a lot of work at the beginning, a lot of facing yourself and looking at yourself, and it's ugly to look at your past behavior and go,
which is why you black out when you drink, is so you don't remember
that's
the ugly
probably
parts.
God's way of helping us.
Yes,
yeah.
yes.
But there's a lot of behavior that I made excuses for that I had to go back and look at and think, oh, that was just me not wanting to, like, a lot of selfishness and, rationalizing my behavior so that I could feel better, feel more comfortable. Not, it was very difficult for me to accept criticism. It was very difficult because I felt like my ego was very fragile. So if you tell me I'm doing something wrong, then that means I'm bad and I'm not going to be able to recover from that. And being sober, you really have to be just brutally honest with yourself all the time to maintain sobriety. Otherwise, your brain is going to fuck with you and figure out how to let you do the thing you want to do again.
Robbie calls it K-Fuck Radio.
I love that.
Which is the station playing in her head all the time.
Uh-huh.
And it's an interesting thing that I've witnessed with her is that it sabotages her a lot. And by the way, you don't have to be an alcoholic to have these tendencies.
Right,
like a lot of these things, the difference is some of us take the hit and the scale is different. It doesn't feel like an 11 on the scale. It feels like a 4. It's still uncomfortable, and I don't medicate behind it. But the things are very similar and the same. So the self-talk. And what I love in the book is that you're letting us in on your self-talk. And the road to you deciding to get sober goes through, I don't mean to use the metaphor of the road, but it's actually driving drunk was it. But It was like, oh my God, what could have happened? Which again, Robbie calls God whispering instead of yelling at you. It's an Oprah thing. It's like, that's a whisper. Mm-hmm. You don't want to hear the full voice, which is, hey, last night your kids were killed, is the full voice message. The whisper is, last night it could have gone bad and it didn't.
Well, when I would hear
But you don't listen to the whispers. A lot of people don't.
Right. And it's easy to, like, in prior days when I would say go to a meeting with a friend to support them, you would hear stories of people that killed somebody in a drunk driving accident. And it's very easy to go,
that's not
me. God. Oh, wow. That person messed up their whole life. That sucks so bad for them. I can't imagine.
That's what I wanted to talk about, because whether you say it on point or not, in the book, it feels this way to me, is that there's two things. One is the K-Fuck Radio, which is the self-sabotage talk, right? That you let me in on, but then there's this other conversation you're having through your entire life, which is the management conversation, which feels like protecting your friend the drink, protecting your friend the wine. Let me find every way possible to make sure it's not a problem so I don't have to give up this friend of mine.
Exactly.
Because I love her.
Yes.
And I need her. And the thought of not having her is bigger than my honesty of what it's costing me. So I can suspend my logic of understanding what this lifestyle has cost me and continues to cost me, and suspend it in my honesty of acknowledging that exists. And yet I'll still wake up humiliated and physically ill and go, I'll never do this again. But you believe that you never will. It's not that you really do.
I also didn't know what alcohol was costing me until I stopped drinking, until I started feeling better. I really didn't know that. I thought my life was fine. You know, I thought I was a bit of a victim mentality, you know, but I thought I was enjoying my life. I mean, I'd written a book that was like doing really well.
Highly functional.
I was highly functional. I was like,
really good mom, really engaged at school.
I loved my kids. I had a great marriage. Like in my mind, it's not costing me that much. It's just these little, sometimes it's bad, you know, but it was the idea that
sometimes would be every Saturday, almost. The sometimes it's bad would be pretty regular.
It was getting more and more regularly bad, of course. Towards the end, it was definitely not good. I mean, towards the end, I was messy and not returning phone calls and isolating and like not really being a part of life. It was just, you know, hunkered down with these babies and feeling very trapped. It was like my twins were 18 months old exactly when I got sober. And I felt like I can't go places. I can't go to a restaurant, you know, and for a person, I'm a pretty social person and I wanted to get back to like, I missed working in TV and I missed having coworkers. There was a lot of things that I didn't have and I was having to try to adjust to. It was difficult. It was the whole thing was like I was having difficulties, but rather than get therapy or do anything to care for myself, I was just like, let me just drink. Let me just mask this. Let me just put a Band-Aid on it. Do you know what I mean?
I totally know what you mean. And that's what's so elusive about addiction of any kind. And you speak a little bit about food and sugar. You speak about, but it could be love, it could be sex. It really doesn't matter what the ism is. Mm-hmm. I mean, the ism's the same. It's whatever the drug of choice can be, even just, you know, there's a million of them.
Right.
What I love in your sharing in this book is you don't make any judgments, and you acknowledge that there are many people who can drink and it's not a problem. So and there are many ways to get sober if you want. So 12-step program, if that's not your thing, then try something else. I don't fucking care. I don't care how you do it. You don't care particularly how anybody gets to where they get to. You're just sharing how you got there and what worked for you.
I know for a fact. I have a friend who did a program called Matrix that I say in the book, who's, you know, he's got to be like sober he's probably 15 years sober. I know people that have read a book and you know, helped them, like The Naked Mind or how to quit drinking without willpower or whatever. I mean, for me, I needed support, and I needed my hand held, and I needed people to call constantly, and I needed to constantly go like, is it normal that I feel really anxious? Is that, you know, I just couldn't do it myself.
Because the same conversations you've been having only with you.
Right.
And the keeping yourself accountable when the part that hurts wants something to make it not hurt.
Yeah.
Is not going to work.
Right.
I think you give a lot of hope in this. I think it's, first of all, Drunkish is the book. It's really easy to read. It speaks like we're speaking. You speak like we're speaking. And what I love most...
I didn't go to college.
Pardon me?
I didn't go to college.
Same.
You didn't either? Did we talk about that?
I went to several weeks, but it's like
Me too.
It's my dark thing. Like I'm constantly trying to be smart in front of other people.
Me too.
And use words and stuff so they think I'm smart because I'm not.
But that's why my book is so easy to read.
Yeah. I knew all the words. I think really why it mattered to me, besides that it rings so closely to my personal journey with Robbie, is that I've talked to so many of you, and you're constantly talking about wondering if things are a problem in your life. And guess what? Most of the times they're not. It's growth, and you'll grow out of it. And, you know, and I'm not saying heavy drinking, whatever. I don't fucking care what you do. Go do it. I drink. I smoke weed. I don't care. But I also don't. I also don't do it. I don't have to.
Right.
But not for everybody. And so what I like about the book and why I think you should read it regardless of where you're at is Stefanie allows you to see her struggle with life, how she feels about it, choices she made that she regrets and choices she made that she feels good about, and the whole story from one perspective all the way through to the end of you can't know what you're missing until you've given up what you thought mattered to see what you were missing.
Right.
And so what happens is in sobriety, which seems like in the drinking world, I'm giving up something. When you read the book, you realize that, in fact, often, and this applies to so many things, the thing we think we're giving up isn't of value, but we're actually giving up the things of value to keep the thing we think is valuable. So it speaks in relationship. Like when you're in a relationship, in a bad relationship, you don't want to break up with this dude or this girl because then I don't have a girlfriend. But the emptiness of not having a girlfriend is far greater than a bad girlfriend. So the empty and meaningless aspect of life, the room for healthy things to exist, is far greater than the thing you're holding on to that you think brings you happiness, but you can't know it, and you can't know it ahead of time. It'd be really great if somebody came to you and said, look, you're an alcoholic and you're drinking too much and your life is unmanageable and these are the reasons why they're unmanageable. But when you're sober, it's going to feel like this. Here, take this pill, ironically, and you'll feel what it feels like to be sober and what your life will be like in 14 years. And that'll make you want to not do this. But you can't do it that way. You have to give up the thing you love, like the only thing you love, to then experience what you actually love.
Well, it's you can make that comparison to relationships. It's like sometimes you'll stay in a shitty relationship,
100%.
not being treated well, until the pain gets so great that your fear of breaking up becomes less than you're wanting to stay together.
Well,
and it's sometimes
classic abusive relationships. You stay in a relationship with a guy who beats you because you don't know him like I do, and it's still a relation. It's still a husband. It's still the thing, and that's alcoholism to me. Is that we fall in love with something that hurts us. It makes us feel good too, because it makes us feel good.
Right.
But it always leaves me feeling empty and humiliated and hurt. But the life without it has got to be worse.
Well, my book editor described it in the description of the book as breaking up with a toxic friend. So I thought
so
that
funny,
was
'cause
very
that's how
apt.
it presents for me.
Yeah, I thought that was very apt. It was like, but I love alcohol, but why is it getting more and more like my experiences are worse and worse with it, diminishing returns, and now this final thing was like I can't afford for that to ever happen again.
And by the way, the diminishing return will still be okay with you as the alcoholic until there's a thing that's not okay with you. And in your case, your kid's danger, the danger of your kid's safety, was it for you? And it's noble. And the thing that touches me through the whole thing is that who you are, even battling whatever demons you share with us and how you dealt with them through alcohol, even with that, because when you hear the story of her childhood, it justifies a certain way of being, but you still aren't that person. You're still a loving wife, even in the drinking, and an incredible mom in a very difficult motherhood situation that happened quickly in a relationship. So these things, who you truly are, is like I called you a warrior. Aww. Who you are is this really integral, with the deep character person that happened to have a problem with alcohol. And you slayed that beast, or at least today.
It's hard to not think you're just a bad person.
That's
when you have addiction to anything. It's hard not to just feel like, God, I'm just a piece of shit, and why can't I do better? And why can't I control this? And I'm just weak. And, it took a lot. Being in recovery really helped me to see that it is an allergy. Mm-hmm. It's a disease.
And not everybody has it.
And my responsibility is to not do it. So that, you know what I mean? Then I can prevent. That's all I have to do. All I have to do is just today not drink.
So the book is called Drunkish. Stefanie Wilder-Taylor is the author. She's written many books. This is the most recent book. And I invite all of you, regardless. I mean, even if you don't drink at all, or if you don't have a problem, as most of you don't, that's not what the book is about. But her story, I promise you, will hit you right in the feels. It was something that you need to hear, and is an easy read to do that. So check out the book, please. I get a commission for every book sold. Only kidding. And Stefanie, thanks.
Thank you, Mark.
I adore you, and have always adored you since we worked together 30 years ago. But really getting to know you through this, and I was reading it going, I remember her at that time. I knew her then. And, oh, wow, I never would have known. And just, it's just a gift. You're giving a gift, which is the thing about life. The more you share the things that you're scared to share, the more you're going to help somebody who needs to hear it. And you've done that with this. And thanks for coming.
We should post a picture of us when we first met.
Do you have it?
The one I showed you.
Oh, yeah, you showed me.
We should put that on the website description.
Totes adorbs, you and me. Adorable.
So cute.
Yeah, so cute. So full of life. Anyway, thanks.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, guys. I hope you heard something that really works for you. And get the book and comment, like, subscribe, all the things. And I'll see you next week.